Hey there, fellow cultists. This is DM Nell, if I can remember my own handle. And I'm coming to you tonight with another video. I am supposed to be actually playing tonight. Supposed to be running a game. But one of my players had to cancel out on me due to work reasons. So I am instead doing another video. And this is actually video number 40. I'm really kind of shocked that I've recorded 39 videos prior to this. And really, it's about 37 more than I thought I would do. But, hey, here we are. And still got stuff to talk about. So let's get to it. So today's video, since it's number 40, not quite the milestone that 50 is. I don't know what I'll do for 50. I may do something special. Maybe I'll put on my dinosaur costume or something. Anyway, so for today's episode, I did want to do something that kind of looks back on Shadow the Demon Lord and what drew me to it to begin with. So the game has been out for, 5.5 years, 6 years now, or something like that, which in and of itself is hard to believe. And I first heard about it from a Kickstarter announcement that Rob Schwab had made. I was a follower of his. It was probably on Twitter, I'm guessing, but I don't know. It's been too long. And there were several things in his description of the game that really drew me. And I've talked about those in some other videos, but one of the things that drew me is the world itself. And the way that he described it was that the world is in its death throes. It's in it is entering its apocalypse phase, basically. And it's a world that is, rapidly descending to its end. That's not really quite true, though. In actuality, the way that the lore is written in the book, it sets the stage for that, certainly, but it does not present a world that is actually in the midst of an apocalypse. It sets the stage for a world that is beginning any number of apocalypses. And it's up to you, the GM, to kick that off. So the book starts with one apocalyptic scenario, and that is the fall of empires. And don't know. I don't think that's what that shadow is called. I forget off the top of my head. Not that it's important, but now it's bugging me. But anyway, while I look this up, it describes the fall of the empire and how that kind of throws the world into a state of chaos, which leads to other things. Fall of civilization is what that is. The shadow is called. And so with the human emperor being murderized by the orcs and an orc ascending to the throne, that is supposed to kick off a series of events that will start the world in this inevitable downward spiral towards chaos and ultimately its apocalypse. In any number of different ways. The book does not outline how you should do it. All it does is it presents different scenarios and leaves it up to the GM to do whatever the hell he wants. And so I love that about this book and about this game, is that it sets it up so that you can create your own apocalypse for your campaign or campaigns. Now, after I read this book and started playing or started running the game, I realized rather quickly that there's no way that I could get this. There's no way that I could, in one campaign, a 0 to 10 campaign, there's no way that I could get the world from its current state to its apocalyptic state in one campaign. It would require a number of campaigns in order for that to happen. So that's when I came up with my idea for running a mega campaign where I would just build on each campaign, and each campaign would move the world that much closer to its apocalypse. So, that's one of the things that really drew me to the world. But actually, in getting the book once the Kickstarter was over, and reading the section that's called it's called A Land in Shadow, and show it to you here. It's that section right there. Starts on page 149. It gives an overview of the main or the major parts of the world. And then, of course, in his series, Lands in Shadow, Mr. Schwab goes even deeper and presents the individual territories, the individual kingdoms, and the individual portions of the campaign world that the core book doesn't have room for. And it goes into basically the lore behind each section or each area, and provides that much more depth to the campaign world. And so when the core book came out, it was a pretty high level campaign world. There wasn't a whole lot of detail, and it was a really good starting point for a GM that just wants to destroy a world, because they can pretty much make up whatever they want. But since then, with all the supplements that have come out, there is even more engaging and complex world to explore, which makes me want to stretch out the apocalypse even more to give me a chance to explore all the different areas and all the different points of interest in this campaign world. So for tonight, I don't have enough voice to do a video long enough to give this campaign world justice. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about just the basic world that's presented in the core rule book. And I'm going to expand a little bit about how I have built upon that myself and kind of injected my own things into the world, because I can't run somebody else's idea of a world. Any campaign that I run, whether it is this game or whether it is the World of Greyhawk or whether it is the Forgotten Realms, I have to make it my own. And I think for the most part, most GMs do that, whether consciously or unconsciously. And you almost cannot avoid doing that, simply because there's no way that you can keep up with, say, a Forgotten Realms and develop your campaign so that it meshes perfectly with all the lore that keeps coming out for the Forgotten Realms. So you have to kind of take a world and make it your own, and that's what I've done with the Lands of Rural, and with the campaign world and the campaign universe of the Shadow of the Demon Lord. So when you do this for your Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign, you kind of have to know what you're working with, what you're starting with. Okay, so if you haven't played the game, if you don't have the core rule book, or if you have the core rule book and just haven't read it, and you're interested but not interested enough to actually go in and dig into the lore, let me give you a little bit of it here and maybe whet your palate some for the goodness that is in this book. So the campaign world centers on this continent, and this is the continent of Rule, R-U with the weird thing above it, L. I pronounce it Rule. I assume that's how it's pronounced. I don't know if that's the case, but in my world, it's the land of Rule. And the land of Rule is one long continent in the southern hemisphere of the planet, which is called Earth, U-R-T-H. And the continent itself is very long, stretching from, I would say, very close to the equator, where the equator would be on this world, down to the polar regions, the southern polar regions of the world. Not quite reaching the polar regions and not quite reaching the equator, but close enough. And so the continent pretty much is the game world from the core rulebook. Now, there are supplements that kind of expand beyond it. One in particular, oh, shoot. I can never remember the names of the supplements, and I'm really horrible at remembering these things, but it is called Beyond the World's Edge. One of my favorite supplements, this thing right here, and it expands the world beyond this continent. And it's really not a very thick book, so it doesn't go into tons of detail, but enough to give you a lot to work with. That I'm saving for a separate video to talk about that bad boy. Okay, so Lands of Rule. And the Lands of Rule are segmented into different territories and different kingdoms and different geographic areas. So the book, of course, the core rule book goes into all those regions. But let me just kind of go into it talks a little bit about the overview and the basics of the world. And it starts off by saying that the gods are distant powers. And that is a kind of a true statement in that the people of the world really don't know if there are gods in the world. They know that there are powerful beings. They know that there are beings that they venerate as gods. But as far as actual gods, the gods really don't interact with the people of the world. For the most part, they remain in their the gods that are represented as physical beings in the game are mostly the old faith, gods of the old faith, and they pretty much keep to their hidden kingdoms. And hidden kingdoms are just pocket dimensions that are accessible through specific places in the world. But even those beings are not gods. They are just beings that have been granted what some would consider to be godlike powers through the worship of their followers. And that's just the nature of this universe. This universe is, or at least this world, is permeated with magic. And one side effect of this magic is that worship has power, and it bestows power upon the being that is being worshipped. It also warps that being into the image of the thing that the worshippers believe in, but it also grants power to that being. And so the gods of the old faith are the result of that. They were presented to the world as gods. People started worshiping them. That worship began flowing into these fae lords and ladies, and suddenly they became bestowed with the power and imagery of the beings that their worshipers thought they were. Now, does that make them gods? Not really. Not in my definition of a god. My definition of a god is a creator. Somebody who created the universe, somebody who created the world, somebody who is responsible for life and fate and fortune and all those things that make up belief, and they keep people going, grant prayers, grant their followers boons. These are the things that gods do. In my view, anyway, in a fantasy world, a god is a creator being. The gods of the old faith are not creator beings. They just happen to be the recipient of good marketing. And as a result, they have been granted immense power. I liken them to the Greek gods because I don't think that the Greek gods were actually gods either. I think they were just powerful beings, once again, that were granted power by the worship of their followers. So I have that same kind of idea for this world. And then, of course, there are other gods beyond the gods of the old faith, much smaller, worshipped by fewer people, but those would be the dark gods. And of course, the new god, which is the probably one of the newer creations. There's also the machine god, which is probably the newest creation of worship. But so gods anyway are they don't interact with the people of the world directly, and the reason probably is because they don't want people to figure out that they're not really gods. So that is one of the premises of this campaign setting, is that gods exist because people worship beings and create their own gods. But as far as a creator being, nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure if there is a creator being. There are myths, there are stories, there are legends. The shadow, or the demon lord, is one of those legends, and there are people that say that the demon lord was once the creator. But these are myths and legends. Nobody really knows for sure. So that's one of the premises of the world. Another one is that the world that you see is not all that there is of the world, that there are hidden worlds, and those are the hidden kingdoms that I mentioned to you earlier. The hidden kingdoms include things like the underworld, hell, Alfheim, which is the kingdom of the Summer Queen, I believe. And there are other pocket universes or pocket dimensions. And there can be any number that you really want. I mean, basically that is wide open for you to do with what you want. I actually had a campaign where one of these pocket dimensions was kind of tapped into by the wizards of the Tower of Caicrus, and that allowed the monsters that were inside that pocket dimension to flow out and populate the world with lots of monsters, which is why there's lots of monsters in the world. That also allowed me to introduce kaiju into the world, because I wanted a world with kaiju, and damn it, I created a campaign where kaiju became a thing. So anyway, that's another story, and that's another video. You can go back and look at my Mother of Monsters campaign videos if you're interested in all that. But anyway, the hidden worlds is definitely a feature of this world that you can play with. Magic is real. That is another feature of the world. Magic is, like I said earlier, basically the physics of this world. Magic is what keeps everything going, and so magic permeates everything. Now, to actually master magic, it takes skill, and it takes practice, or it takes faith. All those good things. You can't just wake up one day and snap your fingers and have every wish you have in your head come to fruition. But well, maybe if you're a sorcerer. But no, actually, sorcerer is an expert pass. You have to start as a magician or as something. But anyway, you gotta have power, and you gotta work to get that power in order to master magic. And even then, you only get a rudimentary skill in power, because your power caps off at 5 in the game, and we all know that it goes up to 10. And so, you never get as powerful as you potentially could get in this game, which is another aspect of it that I love. But anyway, I digress. All right, another another core conceit of this world is that mortals live many lives. There is a circle of life, which means that mortals are born, live through their life, they die, their soul transcends and is recycled and is born again into the world, purged of its former life memories to begin life anew. And mortals are the only creatures that actually do this in this world. There are immortals that don't have this quality, and those immortals are actually a bit jealous of the mortals for this fact. In fact, that's kind of why they kind of keep themselves apart from the mortals. One of the reasons, anyway, is because they don't they don't want the mortals to understand how the circle of life is being controlled by the gods. And that's a thing. So anyway, mortals live many lives, and so they are reincarnated over and over and over again for eternity. There is science and technology in this world. So even though it is a fantasy world, it spans a spectrum of fantasy concepts. And in my campaign, my version of this campaign world, I have everything from medieval sword and sorcery. There are areas. I haven't explored this yet, but I believe that I will have areas down here in the Patchwork Lands that are more, and maybe in the Endless Steppe if I ever decide to work on that. But there are areas of the world that lend themselves to a really Conan-esque Hyboria type of setting. And so I'm kind of playing with the idea of maybe that might be my Patchwork Lands, and the medieval is more of the Empire. And then you start getting into fairly modern times, and that's where the Confederacy of Nine Cities come in and portions of the Northern Reach. So in my mind, the Empire was grounded in medieval ways. So it ruled from Caicres in a grand castle. It had a line of emperors and empresses, and maintained a stranglehold on the rest of the empire. But as the empire grew more decadent, there were parts of the empire that broke away. And the Confederacy and the Nine Cities is a prime example of how breaking away from the empire allowed them to really explore and innovate and grow. And so there are cities that have really begun to develop technology and push the boundaries of what technology can do in this world. And there are also places that push the limits of magic. And so science is a thing here, even though science is not exactly the science in our world, because again, the physics of this universe is magic. But still, it can look like our science. It can act like our science to a degree, until I don't want it to anymore. But to a degree, it can emulate science, and as a result, you get some steampunkish, Victorian era, industrial age era types of places in the world. So, for example, Eads, not Eads, Lidge is the city I'm thinking of. Lidge is the city of wonders, and that is the place where technology, that is like the technological hub of the world. Tons of technologies are being developed in Lidge by the engineers and alchemists and the various learned minds that that flock to Lidge for their for that type of environment. The railway system that spreads through parts of the empire is a prime example of how Lidge developed technology that connected parts of the empire. Now, unfortunately, um, with the emperor's demise, that technological spread has kind of been put on hold. Simply because things, parts of the empire are too dangerous right now. But the start of it had begun anyway. So there are factories in some of these cities. There are universities of learning in many of these cities, and in different parts of the empire. There's a university in Crossings. There's a university in Gateway. Definitely in the cities of the Confederacy, there are universities. I think there's one in Caicres even. So there are seats of learning, and those seats of learning are teaching the world to progress. And so that's one part that I took out of the book, and I kind of expanded on it. There's another section of the world up here in the Crusader Lands, Crusader states, that I've decided to make kind of a Old West vibe. And so these are different holds that have been created as a barrier between the Desolation and the Empire. And there are settlements that have cropped up, probably because of gold or other precious metals that have been found in this area that have drawn people up here to mine and to seek their riches and to get away from the craziness that's going on in the empire. And so I felt like this would be a great place to have like a Cowboys and Indians type of setting. Except no Indians. The Indians would be the undead and the first peoples that live in the Desolation. So that's a campaign that I'm wanting to run at some point that I haven't gotten to yet. And so and then there's a Northern Reach. Northern Reach is like the kind of like the I liken it to the expansion of the colonies in the New World. The colonies being the Empire down here, and then the Louisiana Purchase being the Northern Reach. And so you have explorers that have built cities in parts of the Northern Reach, but there's still a vast area that is not as mapped and explored as it can be. Not to mention developed. So this entire western portion of the Northern Reach is a wilderness, unexplored wilderness. And there are big chunks of the eastern part that's still considered to be wilderness. So that is what the Northern Reach represents. And then, of course, there are other countries that have their own kind of vibe. Tyr maintains its medieval type of setting to it because it's very closely linked to the Empire, as is the Holy Kingdom. The Holy Kingdom is kind of like the Rome of the medieval times that's trying to keep hold of power through the worship of the new god. But now that the emperor is an orc that doesn't like the Holy Kingdom, things are starting to fall apart there. Old Adine is definitely medieval. The Low Country is farming country for the most part. The Marchlands, medieval. Yeah, I mean, this, like I said, the Empire is mostly steeped in medieval, in the medieval time frame, the Dark Ages. Then you get down here and you start getting into some weird places like Balgrendia. It's more of a fairy tale fantasy land. more of a, and I think I talked about this in one of my videos, this is more of a Brothers Grimm type of region. And then you have some nightmare lands, like the Kingdom of Skulls. That place is just a horrid, nightmarish kingdom. And then you got the Blasted Lands and the Blot Land, which are really kind of frontier regions that are not really expanded upon too much in the core book. There is a supplement that goes into some of these lands in, where is it? A Glorious Death covers the Blotland for sure, and I think probably the Blasted Lands as well. It's been a while since I read it, but yeah, these are lands that are they're kind of like Norse mythology type of setting. And I plan on running a campaign in that as well at some point. So as you can see, there are different campaigns or different genres within the same campaign worlds that you can create simply by virtue of the fact that this is such a huge continent that it's feasible that these different genres would exist and coexist and can coexist. So anyway, getting back to the Lands of Rule, the world is filled with terrible monsters, and of course, what kind of a fantasy game would it be if there weren't terrible monsters? So that's a core conceit. The Empire burns. It goes into how the Empire has fallen, and now that's thrown the world into a kind of a state of chaos. And then the Shadow of the Demon Lord, of course, is the other thing that is destabilizing. Or perhaps it's the catalyst that is destabilizing the world and pushing it towards that ultimate apocalypse. The next section goes into the Lands of Rural Geography. I'm not going to go into that for the most part, but I am going to talk a little bit about some of the geography that has some potential for some coolness, but I haven't really done anything with it yet. So there's some pretty big geographical areas here and features. Lots of mountain ranges. So you got the Shield Mountains, you've got the Fire Peaks, and the Shield Mountain Range is just enormous. It stretches from the southeastern or southwestern edge of the continent, and it just kind of goes around over to the Freehold of Nar. So it is a huge mountain range. And then you got the Fire Peaks that branch off of it. And, just lots you can do in mountains. Mountains are a feature that can, be a great place for campaigns and for adventures. One of my favorite adventures from classic Dungeons and Dragons is the expedition to the Barrier Peaks, which features a mountain range that has a UFO that crashed into it. So mountain ranges are cool places that you can explore. There is a Deepings Gorge, which is a gorge that is miles wide and nobody knows how deep it is. You've got so many bodies of water here, including the oceans on both sides. You've got the salt sea down here. Just all kinds of geographic regions to play with if you want to. If you get bored with and play, you can definitely venture into these different geographic regions. The cool thing of the Northern Reach that I like is that it's actually divided into two sections. There is this thing called the Fall, which is it's like there was some kind of seismic event that caused part of this continent or part of this section of the continent to just fall. So you've got the upper part, which is the part that's, that has crossings and thorp and foundry on it, and then you got the lower part on the eastern side here that has gateway and landfall and good fortune. So it's separated by this cliff that is a pretty significant cliff. And it separates the two sections of the Northern Reach. So the Northern Reach is actually even more interesting when you consider that it has two different geographic sections. And then, of course, there's the Desolation, which there's a whole book on the Desolation, Tombs of the Desolation, which I also have in here somewhere, right here. This goes into the Desolation, talks about it. However, it really doesn't go into a whole lot of detail of the Desolation. Talks about some of the monsters that can be found there, and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, if you really want to set a campaign up in the Desolation, you're going to have to create it yourself, because there's not too much that you can draw from in this book. This book and also the Men of Gog supplement is where you're going to find the majority of the information on the Desolation. But essentially, to me, the Desolation is another place that can be like ancient Egypt for the most part. And so you've got the Old West and ancient Egypt up here. Or if you don't like that, I also kind of think of it as the desert that the villain Mum-Ra lives in his Black Pyramid in the Thundercats, the old good one from the 80s cartoon. So, I actually have a Mum-Ra type villain that I intend to introduce at some point in one of my campaigns, but that's a story for another day. So, that's the Desolation. That can be your ancient Egypt type setting. So lots that you can do here, and this setting is just rich with potential for all kinds of campaigns. So that's why I love it so much. Okay, so those are the geographic regions. Let me talk a little bit about the current nations. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of rule, because I think I've talked about that in previous videos, and I actually have a timeline that I created based off of the dates that I could find of all the historical events that have occurred in the world, and I had to actually fill in some gaps for my campaign world. But I have a document that has all the dates for this timeline from the beginning of the universe to present day campaign that I'm running. So there's all kinds of history here, but I'm not going to go into that history right now. Instead, just the state of the world today is what mostly I am focusing on, because that's where your campaign is going to be set in. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Empire has fallen. The orcs have taken control and have destabilized the entire region below the Shield Mountains. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's not really spelled out in the book on what you should do with this. Well, it kind of is, I guess, in the shadow of the shadow section of the book. It does kind of explain how you can take that and progress it, and then that is expanded upon even more in the one of my favorite supplements of the book, which is The Hunger and the Void, which takes the shadows and expands on them even more. So for the fall of civilization, it goes into how your campaign can be set up, talking about the Emperor dying, what the novice campaign could entail. It talks about the expert campaign and how the orc army can start spreading out into the campaign world and the end of all things, which is like the ultimate war against good and evil and all that stuff. That's assuming that you want to wrap everything up in one campaign. Now, I've kind of taken that concept and I've I'm stretching it out. That the fall of civilization is going to be played out in my campaign over several other campaigns. It started in Tales of the Demon Lord, which was how I kicked off my Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign, and it's just slowly progressing over time. And currently, in my campaign world, what has happened is since the fall of the Empire and the rise of the Orc Emperor, um, the Orc Emperor has been kind of consolidating his power, getting the orcs to rally under him, trying to find out what kingdoms remain loyal, what kingdoms don't, who his target's going to be. And that takes some time, so that's what he's been doing. And throughout all of this, he has been throwing some major shade at the Holy Kingdom and Tyr. Tyr, because that is where the true heir of the human emperor resides. The Holy Kingdom, because that is the seat of power for the Church of the Cult of the New God, and the Cult of the New God has never ever condoned the use of the Orc army, slave army. They thought that the orcs were abominations, and as far as the church was concerned, they felt that the orcs should be slaughtered. Essentially, they felt that the orcs were, like I said, abominations. And so the orcs knew this, and now that they're free to do what they want to do, they got a little vendetta against the Holy Kingdom. So that is actually the first target. Holy Kingdom's got this huge ass target on it as site number one for the orc attack. And so that is actually what has been built up over the last couple of campaigns that I've run. And it's just now that the orcs have started to attack the Holy Kingdom at its borders. Now, this is all happening in the background. My players are not directly involved, but they're hearing about it, and they're seeing how this affects the different cities that they are in. The last two campaigns, they've been in the Confederacy of the Nine Cities, and they definitely saw how there were some churches that were recruiting to aid the Holy Kingdom. There was some pressure from the governments that were still loyal to Caicrus to shut down those types of recruitment activities. And so there's all kinds of politics happening that are happening because of these events that are occurring. And so that's what's happening in the heart of the empire. War has begun, and it's only going to spread from here. At some point, if Tyr doesn't attack first, then the orcs are going to march on Tyr. Then Old Adine. They still have the support of the Caicrus still has the support of the Grand Duchy and the Marchlands. The Orc Emperor is not going to make the same mistake that that's the Witch King did in trying to attack Balgrendia. Balgrendia is doing its own thing. It is not bothering anybody, and the Emperor is going to leave them the fuck alone. But the Emperor is eventually going to force the Confederacy of the Nine Cities to make a stand and to pick a side. And then, of course, once the empire is consolidated under Orc rule, then the plan is that they will march north and resume control of the Northern Reach, which is kind of broken free and has started to, in some parts, declare their freedom from the empire. So these are kind of like the original 13 colonies and the Boston Tea Party, and fuck you to the emperor. We're doing our own thing up here, and that's kind of sort of what's happening in the Northern Reach today. So that's the current climate, and that's just in the real world. Now, what's happening in the hidden kingdoms is that they're trying to stay the hell out of what's happening in the real world. They have closed their borders for the most part to their hidden kingdoms, and the elves and fae and fairies really don't want to have anything direct to do with the orcs and this war that is going on. However, they do want to take advantage of the chaos that is kind of happening here. And so, you've got some fae that are still doing their fae thing, kidnapping children and replacing them with changelings and being mischievous and all that stuff. But as far as the official policy of the fairy and fae kingdoms, they are isolationists. They do not want to become involved in the affairs of men. Then, of course, you have down here in the Blotland and the Blasted Lands, you've got the Jotun, who still have a score to settle with the Empire because of the humiliation that they endured during one of the wars that had occurred in the last 900 years that actually resulted in the creation of the Orc army. So which side will they take? Will they take the Empire side now that the Empire is being ruled by an Orc? Or will they decide to just march on the entire Empire and crush everybody under their Jotun heels and, just take over? We don't know at this point. I haven't decided which way that's going to go. I'm trying to see how it kind of naturally organically develops. But at any rate, that's kind of what's happening in the world right now, and that's the environment that the campaign is set up in. Now, of course, your campaign may be totally different. You may decide that this is entirely a fantasy setting. There is no steampunk section. There is no cowboys and Indians section. There is no ancient Egypt. There is no Hyboria. You may decide this is pure sword and sorcery, medieval, Dark Ages type fantasy, and that's perfectly fine. If you want to do that, there's room for that. There's perfectly room for that in this campaign world. But for me, there's just too much opportunity to have fun with these different genres and trying to mesh them all together to make a patchwork of a campaign. And it's been fun so far. Now, to be honest, I haven't really explored too much into the other genres. I did touch a little bit on the steampunk aspect in my last campaign. The characters went to Lidge. They took an airship. They saw how the Clockworks were trying to revolt against their oppression in Lidge. So they got a taste of it there, but for the most part, it's been almost pure fantasy, sword and shield type of fantasy for my last 3 campaigns. So I think I'm going to shake it up in my next campaign. I think my next campaign is going to be a little different. And I actually lie a little bit because I actually have run 4 campaigns. There was a side campaign that I did for a group that was not that's not my home group that I'm running my core campaign in with now. I did run a separate campaign for this online group, and I actually took the universe, not really the universe, the solar system of the that's presented in one of the supplements that have been produced. I didn't get it. I haven't gotten in print, and I forget the name of the supplement. But at any rate, that supplement details the different planets and a campaign that you can run out in outer space. And so I ran a campaign in the solar system. starting on the moon of Tartarus, and then it just kind of went from planet to planet, and resulted in a climactic battle with the Queen of the Reen. And so that actually was that was an experiment. That was me playing with one of these subgenres that is presented in this entire mess of a game. And that was like meshing science fiction and fantasy together, and I loved it. It was so fun to run that campaign. I'm not sure if I have a video talking about it. I think I do, but at any rate, that was tons of fun, and I want to do that again with my core group. And I want to do, the Cowboys and Indians thing for sure. And I think that might be my next. That might be my next campaign if I can come up with a good story to base that on. So at any rate, so that is the. That's how things are going here in the continent of Roll. Now, let me see if there's anything else here in this section of the book. It does talk about the major settlements. It talks about peoples and cultures. Talks about religion. Talks about the cosmology, and that's pretty much about it. So, this little section of the book goes from page 149 to 174, and just reading that will give you so many ideas for so many different campaigns that you will have years and years worth of running a game just with the ideas that you get out of this, let alone picking up all these freaking supplements. Look at this. This is ridiculous. Okay, this is just what I have been able to purchase in book form. This doesn't even scratch the surface of all the supplements that I have that you can't get in print. And I've got most of those printed out in this binder that you can't see. See this binder? It's a thick-ass binder. I've got tons of supplements printed out in here. And I've got adventures and another binder up on my shelf. So there's so much to this game. There's so much inspiration. There's so much coolness that I can't really see ever wanting to run a Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign in a different world. And I see some people talking about doing that, taking the Shadow of the Demon Lord rules and running it in their own campaign world. And you know what? That's cool. To each their own. I like creating my own campaign world too. It's just a little bit too much work for me. I've created 2 or 3 different campaigns in the past, but I usually end up abandoning them because it takes so much work to create just one little area of your world and to flesh it out good enough so that you can run a game in it, let alone if your players just all of a sudden decide to up and go to an unexplored area of the world. And now all of a sudden over in the next week, you've got to create an entire region from scratch so that your players have some place to adventure. The younger me would have been all over that, but today I just don't have the time or the energy to create that much. I wish I did, because it is fun. I do enjoy creating stuff myself. That is tons of fun. I just don't have the time. And so this does it for me and gives me just enough to inspire me to create more stuff to go with it. And that's just as fun for me. So, I don't normally do reviews, and I'm not really considering this a review. I just talk about shit that I like. And I really like this game so much that I've done 40 videos now about it. And, I'm not even a guy that does videos. I just started this YouTube channel just to do these videos. Because nobody else is doing them. And, I love watching videos like this where people talk about their campaign. They talk about the campaign world. They talk about supplements. They talk about the rules, and that's what I wanted to create here. And I hope that I've done that, and I hope I've given the viewers something to come back to, and I hope I've given you something that you can spread to the greater community, because ultimately, I got to be honest with you. I don't like where D&D is going. I don't like where the rules are going. I don't like where I don't like the lack of a campaign world. I mean, okay, I'm going to bitch a little bit here, so bear with me. So it used to be that D&D had, the world of Greyhawk, and it had the Forgotten Realms, and it had Eberron, and it had Dark Sun, and it had Ravenloft, and it had all these cool different campaign worlds, and you could pick the campaign world that you like, and each campaign world was for the most part kind of fleshed out like this one is, and sometimes it had supplements, sometimes it didn't, sometimes it had whole books dedicated to different parts of the campaign world. Right now, all D&D really has, for the most part, is the Forgotten Realms, and only one portion of the Forgotten Realms, which is the Sword Coast. Now, the Forgotten Realms that I grew up with had a box set that featured an entire world, and then it had more box sets that came out that talked about different portions of that world and gave so much freaking detail that you could set up your own campaign in different parts of the Forgotten Realms. And you had so much source material that you could have years and years worth of fun just in the Forgotten Realms. Well, today, all you've got is what they produced in the adventure books and the Sword Coast Guide. And that's not enough for me. I need the whole world kind of outlined for me, and then I can pick where I want to adventure, and I can expand upon it if there's not a supplement. And if there is a supplement, great. I can still expand upon it if I want to. D&D just doesn't have that for me right now. It's got, like I said, the Sword Coast. It's got Eberron. It does have Ravenloft. So if you want to do a campaign in Ravenloft, that's an excellent book. I do like the Curse of Strahd. It's a fantastic adventure. I haven't run it yet. I plan to one of these days, but it's a really, really good self-contained campaign world. Now, it's not huge, so it's kind of limited in what you can do with it, but it is a campaign world. Eberron, I've got the book. Can't say I've read it. I have several of the old Eberron books, which again, lots of supplements, expands on the world. You've got a whole world to play with, but this has only got one book so far. So I don't know really how much you can do with Eberron. Dark Sun doesn't exist. Spelljammer doesn't exist. Planescape doesn't exist. So, these are things, if you want to recreate them from old material, you can certainly do that. To me, way too much work. So anyway, that's just me bitching again about the direction that Wizards of the Coast has taken D&D, which, I will always love D&D. It's always what brought me into this hobby. I've played and DM'd every edition from first edition, the hardback first edition books, all the way up until fifth edition, and I still have a fifth edition campaign that I do for my my old high school gaming group. But it's not my favorite campaign. This is my favorite campaign. This is what I look forward to running every week. And this is what I put my creative energies into in order to, to scratch that itch, that creative itch that I have. So anyway, I babbled on now for how long? Long time. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it quits here. So I hope I've given you a decent overview of the campaign setting and as it exists when you open up the core book, and this is the world that you're landing on. This is what you are setting the stage to start your own apocalypse. Now, come back and visit me in episode 80 and see where I'm at. Hopefully by that time I'll have a few more campaigns under my belt, and have moved my campaign world closer to that final apocalypse. But it's going to take years for me to get there. So you're going to have to bear with me, and you're going to have to deal with all the videos that I create as a result. So hope you enjoy the ride as much as I enjoy driving us there. So at any rate, that's it. I'm out of here. So hail to the Demon Lord, Rob Schwab, for putting this game together. And once again, if you enjoy the video, please hit like. That helps to increase the visibility and YouTube. And ultimately, as I mentioned pretty much in every video, my goal here is to spread the word and to grow this game and make it more popular than D&D. I don't think that's possible, but I'm doing my small part. So if you can do your small part, spread the word, like my videos, share my videos, and hopefully we can get enough people liking this game where we can give D&D a run for its money and make Robert Schwab a very rich man. And I'm sure he'd like that too. All right, so with that, I'm out of here. So I will catch you next time. Hail.